Welcome to the Pitchwerks podcast. I'm Scott McTaggart. Over the last 20 years, I've been a sales rep, a marketer, a manager, an executive, a consultant, and an advisor. This show is designed to give you access to my list of contacts so that you can learn more about how to present your ideas at work and succeed in your career.
Startups and salespeople, marketers and managers from the Epicast Network in Pittsburgh. It's the Pitchwerks podcast.
If people are generally confused and generally unclear at the end of the trial, they tend to maintain the status quo.
Hey everybody, it's Wednesday, it's Scott, and it's the Pitchwerks podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I got a cool one on the hook for you. Jason Matzus, he's a trial attorney. He actually is representing plaintiffs in personal injury cases. So Jason he's got all these different awards and boards and things that he's sat on. Very, very decorated. He's been at this for over 20 years. Teaches over at the university. I wanted to bring him in and talk about how does an attorney present ideas? Because it's the same thing that we're doing. When we craft a pitch, whether it be for a marketing campaign or we're writing copy or you're selling something to a user, the idea is you have a structure of information that you need to present, and there's a certain way to do it. Jason's going to talk to us about how he prepares, how that's changed over time. Let's get the typical rundown of tasks out of the way. The Pitchwerks experience comes together at pitchwerks.com. Please make sure to visit me there and see everything that's going on, whether you're talking about these podcast episodes, which are all available there, the Pitchcraft blog, which tells you a little bit about, what some of our guests are up to. Anything that we've got going on all happens at pitchwerks.com. That's pitchwerks. Same goes for social media. You're going to find us on Twitter, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, which I'm getting better about reminding you about. Facebook. Everything's under Pitchwerks. Again, put the E in works. pitchwerks. Find us. Give us a shout. Let us know, what you think. If you're so inclined, I would also appreciate, some star ratings and reviews, iTunes, Google Play, wherever you find us. I've been asking you for this for a while. I realize sometimes it probably grates on you, but, suffice it to say, it's important to me and the other people that make this show to get those reviews, to be able to share them with other people who are looking for good shows. Do that for us. We'd really appreciate it. I want to get into the interview with Jason now. I really appreciate him coming in. Jason Matzus from Matzus Law. All right, so here we are, and I think everybody kind of knew that this was coming, right? Like, we can't talk about how ideas get presented without bringing in someone who has to do it under the gun. Jason Matzus, how are you?
I'm good, Scott. How are you?
Man, I'm really glad you came in.
No, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
So what you do is kind of scary to people. I think that old expression about the greatest fear is like public speaking I think that's real. I think people get worried about getting up in front of a room full of people and talking. And then you have sort of this extra thing where there's something riding on it. You're not just getting up and giving a book report.
No, that's true. And I think the research on the fear of public speaking has held up and stood the test of time, so to speak. So I think it is a tremendous anxiety-provoking experience for most people. I don't know how I've weathered that storm, and I don't necessarily know if I weather it well or not, but, for good or for ill, this is my chosen profession.
Do you still feel it, though?
I think, I always get nervous
before
the start of a trial. And during the course of the trial, when you're in the heat of battle, that anxiety, I think, recedes for most people. And I kind of analogize it, Scott, to athletes.
Yeah.
No matter, what year or how veteran the athlete is, most athletes will still tell you, you get a little bit nervous. You have jitters and butterflies in your belly before the game, but you channel that nervousness. You channel that anxiety in a productive way to maximize your performance, and that's what I try to do.
But I don't pretend that to have the same stakes as you do, right? Being at work and actually needing people to agree with me on something, I still get it, right? And it subsides a little bit once I get going because I know I've been there before.
And I think it's a good thing that you still get it. And I think it's a good thing that veterans still get it.
Yeah.
That means you care. I think that's the right feeling to have. I think when you go into whether it's a big game or a big trial and you don't have that feeling, maybe it's time to think about moving on.
So you're focusing on personal injury?
Correct.
And how many people are in a room when you get up and you give an argument in court? Like, I don't think a lot of us have been there.
Well, at trial versus, oral argument before a judge in pre-trial phases of the case. But at trial, you have 12 people that sit as members of the jury in a state court case in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
You have 2 alternative jurors usually. So you have 14 people that comprise the jury pool. 12 will be voting members at the end of the trial, and the other 2, if nobody gets sick or needs to be excused, they don't vote. But they sit there for the duration of the trial and deliberations nonetheless.
They definitely count towards the size of the crowd.
They do. And then you have the judge, then you have the tip staff, then you have the court reporter. Then depending upon the number of parties in the case and the people that are there representing those parties, you can have another 8, 10, 12 people. And courtrooms, by and large, are open to the public. So anybody can come in at any point in time and sit into the general audience and watch the trial.
I'm hearing 50 people is not outlandish.
Well, that would be in an extreme situation. I think the typical average, at least for most routine state court cases, civil cases especially, is probably 20-ish, maybe right. 25.
Okay. Still, that's a classroom.
And I'll define that by active members, jurors, the judge, tip staff, lawyers, the parties. Now, if it's a case that has public interest, you might have spectators in the crowd, news media, things like that.
When you say tip staff, who is that?
Those are employees of the judge. They help the judge manage the courtroom and run the courtroom.
Got it. I've never heard that term.
Sometimes they're referred to as deputies, things of that nature.
I'm very lucky that I haven't done a lot of miles in the courtroom, and knock wood on that.
That's always a good thing.
Right? Yeah, I'm not sure I want to get good at this.
If you can get through life and not be able to describe what the inside of a courtroom looks like, you're a lucky person.
You're a jury duty dodger.
Yeah, right.
It's really common when people get in front of a group that they start to forget maybe what they had planned, right? They come in maybe with a sketch of what they wanted to say, maybe a rehearsed script. But when the pressure's on, I can only imagine how easy it is to lose your place, to not necessarily understand or remember. It's not understand. You understand your argument, but you're not hearing it the same way as everyone else is hearing it because you've got to keep your timing right and your spacing right. And it's like, okay, I've got to make sure I hit this point. And you're also, I have to believe, surveying everyone that's listening and seeing what kind of reactions, right?
Certainly.
How are you organizing? When you go in, you know that you've got court tomorrow. How do you organize your thoughts so that you don't freeze up and that you know that you've got to put the minimum amount of management into your thought process?
Well, I like most other things in life, preparation. And there are a variety of ways to get yourself prepared. First, you have to know who you are and what you need to feel comfortable to be prepared. Some people require a lot of prep work before emotionally they feel comfortable. Other people don't require that much prep work. I tend to be on the side of one of those folks that requires a lot of prep work, so I put the time in. I do my homework before any event where I'm going before the judge in any aspect of the case.
So is that like rehearsing maybe? Like saying it out loud?
Well, that's highly recommended.
Yeah.
And this is one of those situations where I'm going to encourage people to do as I say, but not necessarily do as I do.
Well,
I think there's an old Zig Ziglar line, listen to me very carefully, but don't watch me too closely. And this, I think, is one of those examples.
I grew up on Zig.
Right. I personally don't do a mock rehearsed presentation.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's beneficial to do that, certainly, and especially for young trial lawyers. I would encourage all young trial lawyers to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you've been at this for a while now. And, just to make sure everybody sort of understands all your various peacock feathers, you're a Pennsylvania super lawyer and, you've sat on different boards and been recognized in a lot of different ways. So the advice that you're giving got you somewhere. This isn't something, you pulled out of a textbook or you just, you heard might work. You've actually employed these ideas.
Right. I got 20 plus years of in the trenches and the battle scars that go with all that. So I'm speaking from experience, whether it's good or bad experience. Right. Depends upon the perspective. But certainly I've been in the trenches and I've been in these situations. So I'm speaking from experience.
So you're not necessarily doing a rehearsal, but maybe earlier in your career you did, or you got in front of a mirror to see what you looked like, those kinds of things?
Certainly. And today with the ubiquity of video, oftentimes it's very helpful to video yourself if you're giving an opening statement or if you have an oral argument coming up. Have somebody turn on the video camera, do your presentation, look at yourself, understand how you're coming across, because I think by and large, most people don't have the ability to accurately gauge how they are projecting and presenting.
I don't think it's necessarily even in their top 3 priorities when they're in that hot seat.
I think they're so focused on the content,
getting through it,
that they can forget about those things. And as a lot of the social science research indicates, oftentimes it's more important how you say something than it is what you say or the content that you're actually speaking. And I think for trial lawyers especially, recognizing that and developing your skill set to play to those strengths is crucial. But I don't necessarily sit there and develop specific Q&As and develop a script, if you will,
right.
For a variety of reasons. But most importantly, I think the key for a trial lawyer in helping the witness to provide the information that the trial lawyer wants as part of the overall story of the case is by crafting the appropriate questions to lead that witness through the factual narrative as best as
and the completeness
possible.
Maybe of the information that you're looking for.
Correct.
Do I want to know that you were there? Do I want to know that you were there in the morning? Do I want to know that you were late arriving? Right? There are 3 different
certainly
versions of what could be the same
right.
answer.
The mere fact that you're there might not be the most important aspect of you being there. So how do you create the questions in a way that, one, brings it out in a dynamic way?
Yeah.
Because you have 12 people sitting on the jury that you can't afford to lose. It's challenging to hold anybody's attention in these day and ages for a mere few minutes, let
That's
alone
true.
Days on end over the course of a trial. And you're presenting complicated issues that are unfamiliar to the jury. And there's a whole lot of facts for the jury to remember. I mean,
despite that, you've actually got issues that a lot of times I have to believe are not terribly familiar to the counsel, right?
Oftentimes, I mean.
So you're sitting here presenting on an idea. So this is an auto accident case, and you have to talk about the physics of wet asphalt and centripetal force around this bend. I guarantee you, I'm jogging some memories here.
No, you can get into a lot of very complex scientific and engineering issues, even in what I'll generically refer to routine car crash cases.
Right.
The benefit of a routine car crash case, for example, from the jury's perspective, is most jurors have driven a vehicle or ridden in a vehicle. So they understand the rules of the road. They understand the basic physics, if you will, behind operating a motor vehicle. Now contrast that with a medical malpractice case where you're dealing with very complex medical issues, very complex scientific issues that nobody on the jury has any background exposure or familiarity with for the most part.
Right.
How do you present that complex information in a way that they understand it and comprehend it?
And they remain open to receive it.
Absolutely.
Well, to your point about the attention span.
Right.
So if you're boring me, I may think I'm doing my civic duty, but for a minute there, I was thinking about the new X-Men trailer.
If you're mentally checked out,
right?
Okay, that's a problem for the trial lawyer.
Yeah.
Because if people don't understand your position in a case, it makes it difficult for them to actually find in your client's favor. And I think one of the things that some trial lawyers make the mistake of doing is talking over the heads of jurors.
And so speaking jargon on purpose or doing it just because? that happened to be in the reading?
I don't think it's on purpose. I just think it's the language they're used to using.
Ah,
For
got
example.
it. Okay, so they're comfortable with it, but the jury may not have any idea.
Exactly. You're using the proverbial 25-cent word instead of the nickel word that everybody else on the jury would understand. And oftentimes, you fall in a trap that you talk with various experts and you start to use the language that experts use and use the technical language that's in the medical literature or the science and engineering. And you forget that language, by and large, is a foreign language to most people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you speak in that language at trial, in my opinion, you're doing your client a disservice because you need to break it down to very simple, clear, concise, plain English.
In your experience, if someone doesn't understand what's being discussed, not for lack of trying, I'm not talking about someone who coasted through and daydreamed. If a juror doesn't understand the subject matter, are they more likely to go one way or the other, to find for the plaintiff or the defendant?
I think the research is clear. They're more likely to find for the defendant. And here's the explanations.
Interesting.
As to why. Remember, the plaintiff in any particular case has the burden of proof.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I represent plaintiffs. I have to convince 10 out of 12 of the jurors that our position is the correct position.
And you have met that burden.
Correct. So if 9 people think it's the correct position and 3 people don't, we lose the case.
Second prize is a set of steak knives.
Exactly. Second prize is no prize.
Right.
And the defense really doesn't have to convince any one juror that they're correct. All they have to do is plant seeds of doubt that the plaintiff isn't as correct as they think they are.
They can run out the clock.
Position. Absolutely. They can create enough doubt where 3 people are on the fence and they might not believe the defendants, but they don't believe the plaintiffs either.
Right.
So they don't vote in favor of a plaintiff, and that results in a verdict for the defendant. So when jurors don't understand what my theory of the case is, if you will,
yeah,
that almost guarantees a loss for my clients. And I certainly don't mean this in a derogatory nor pejorative fashion toward defense lawyers.
Yeah.
But certainly part of the defense strategy, if you will, in many cases, is to create confusion and complexity at each and every turn where they can.
Right.
Because that ultimately benefits their client from the decision-making and burden of persuasion and burden of proof standpoint. If people are generally confused and generally unclear at the end of the trial, they tend to maintain the status quo.
See, and that actually has a twin brother in the corporate B2B sales world. There's always that person who doesn't want to make the new purchase, right? They don't want to invest in the new thing.
Certainly.
And
usually the CFO or somebody in the financial department.
Somebody who's worried about the bottom line.
Nobody wants to own that decision to spend money.
Somebody who's got a brother-in-law in the business and they don't want to see you get the contract. And they say, this is way more complicated than you think it is. Obviously, a law firm is also a business.
Absolutely.
And you have to, in between, meetings with opposing counsel and in between trips to trial, you actually have to do some business development. You have to find those new cases that you're going to work on. What does that look like?
I generally have an unsophisticated approach, if you will, toward marketing. I try to do the best job for each client that I can do, both in terms of providing service to the individual client and then with respect to representing that client in the case with opposing counsel. Many of my referrals, Scott, come from lawyers that have been on the opposite side of the case from me, that have represented adversaries in other cases that I have filed.
When you talk to folks that maybe aren't referred to you, so you bump into somebody at wherever and you say, hi, I'm Jason, what do you do? And then they come back. How do you present yourself and what you do?
Well, I think at all times, clarity and focus is powerful, right? Clarity of thought, clarity of communication, is powerful in any presentation.
Absolutely.
Whether you're formally marketing or whether you're informally marketing in those types of casual conversations.
So you're trying to get a small number of bullet points across.
Correct.
That's your motive, right?
Correct.
Is like, I don't want to talk too long and I don't want to confuse the issue. So you say,
I think you want to communicate, or at least what I try to communicate when I'm asked by people, what are your thoughts about this particular case or this particular issue? You try to communicate very succinctly that you have domain expertise.
right.
And you also try to communicate that you have the intellectual flexibility and nimbleness to understand that these are complex cases.
Mm-hmm.
And over the course of any particular case, things may change. And you have to be able to anticipate what may occur and prepare alternate strategies if
Right. Back up and back
that
out
event
plans, right?
does arise. Exactly.
If this doesn't go the way I think it's going to go, what am I going to do?
Contingency planning is critical. You can always anticipate what a witness may say during the course of his or her deposition, but until that deposition's over, you don't know what they've actually said.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, they usually say something that's a little bit different than what you anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to be prepared to react to that, not after the fact, but you got to be prepared to react to that during the course of the deposition.
That, I think, is a huge challenge for people because they're thinking so much about so many things in the moment. It can be hard to listen. It can be hard to listen with the right ears.
Absolutely. And, I teach at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, and one of the things I try to impress upon the students in my class with respect to taking depositions,
Yes.
the best deposition skill you need to have as a trial lawyer is to be a good listener. Sometimes you go into the deposition, you have your outline of questions, you become so wedded to your outline that you ask a question, a witness gives you an answer, and you just move on to the next question because you haven't really listened carefully to the answer that they gave you.
This is one of the reasons why I hate in the sales game when people have these like 14-point things that they have to do. Like, okay, and then the dog and pony come out, right?
Right.
And they do the exact same thing, but they're not open to the detour in the road that could potentially be shorter.
Certainly.
So they're going to keep forging ahead with the thing they think is going to pay off. Meanwhile, an opening was created. They're like, no, you don't understand. We're only on step 7, and now I need to go to step 8.
Absolutely. And, in the course of like a deposition, for example, or even questioning a witness live at trial, oftentimes they'll give you an unexpected answer, but within that answer is a gift.
Yes.
And if you're not listening for that gift, you might miss it. And similarly, in the presentation sense, how many corporate presentations have you sat through or seen where the presenter has their slide deck prepared and they're adequately going through the slides, but they get a question from the customer in the audience?
Happens all the time.
And
a lot
they
of times,
fumble it.
well, or the question actually helps you to understand that they're not on the same page with you.
Absolutely.
That's usually where that goes, is you realize that you're assuming that
your audience member, your listener, doesn't follow.
They do
what
not
you just
share
said.
your understanding of the subject.
Or at times, they've expressed a need in that question that you haven't anticipated or recognized, and that presents you with an opportunity
Yes.
to address that need. And if you're not prepared for it, or if you're not intellectually nimble enough to respond to it, that could be a missed opportunity.
Do you ever fall back on familiar scripts? You're in the courtroom, like I said, you're juggling all these different things. Or even you're just asking a judge to give you, a judgment in your favor on something. I know I do this. There are certain turns of phrase. There are certain clear phrases, if not complete sentences, that have worked for me enough that I keep using them.
Right.
Do you do the same?
They're in your default memory. Right?
Yes,
your
they're muscle memory.
Default operating. And absolutely. And there are various contexts on various issues that are somewhat uniform in particular types of cases or when you're questioning particular types of witnesses. So it always helps, I think, to have that mental script. And I think of it in today's computer age when you're talking about preparation and how do you prepare. I try to mentally prepare that file folder with subfolders and then folders within the subfolders so that I have my mental outline pretty well settled in my working memory, such that when you're going through it, you're prepared to go through it from start to finish. But if you're asked a question, for example, by a judge during oral argument, and it takes you outside of your pre-planned outline or takes you further into it than you otherwise want to be at that particular moment, if you have that ingrained in your memory, that mental outline, it makes it much easier for you to get back into the flow of everything, as opposed to not having done the preparation beforehand to have that type of mental outline ingrained in your working memory.
Are you a person that believes that writing things down helps you to remember them?
It does for me.
Yeah.
That invariably is step one in a lot of my preparation, is to sit down and actually write out. And
it's got to be the handwriting, though.
In the beginning of my career, I literally would script out every word of every opening, every word of every closing, every question for depositions.
I remember doing this.
And it was, somewhat painful, somewhat tedious, but for me, that made me exceptionally prepared. And the other thing that it does, at least for me, and again, different people, different strokes for different folks, but it gives me the self-confidence to know that I'm prepared. It gives
Ernest
me
Hemingway once said
emotional
that the first draft
security
of anything is crap, right?
Absolutely.
And he meant it as advice, I think.
Well, and I think was it Mark Twain, a similar quip along the lines of, I apologize about the length of this. If I had more time, it would be shorter.
My good friend Marie loves that quote. She says that, I didn't have time to write a shorter one.
Right.
And yeah, I'd never heard it when she told me. And it's brilliant. The first time you go through, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. You're going to take up more paper than you need to, but it at least familiarizes yourself with what one potential attack looks like, what one potential approach looks like. And then you go, okay, wow, this is kind of a mess, right? But at least now you've started to commit it and you start to know the script. And maybe on the second polish.
The jury knows nothing about the case.
Yeah.
They're not given an executive summary, if you will, in writing beforehand. So they're learning everything. Question by question, answer by answer. And if you as a trial lawyer ask unclear, confusing, difficult to understand questions, they're going to be so focused on the difficult question and what it meant that they might miss the answer, or the witness might not understand the question and might give a less than clear, less than precise answer to it. And those mistakes tend to compound.
That's a mistake I make here. I make that mistake here. I do listen for the opening, right? I listen for something I didn't know was going to reveal itself. Right. And then all of a sudden, there's a piece of information that I never thought I was going to have to ask for. Very quickly, I have to come up with a way to ask it. Nobody's livelihood is riding on, the outcome here.
And you have to, I think, be precise. And go into, I go into trial preparation with the mindset that every detail matters. Because if you ignore a detail, even if it's a small detail, that could take on a different life in the courtroom.
Especially if you don't fully understand the story and you, along with the jury, are going to be learning new information, you're not exactly sure how that thread finishes.
Absolutely. You might perceive it to be a small detail because you simply don't understand the magnitude of it in the big picture. And you certainly don't want to learn that.
It's the OJ glove.
In the courtroom. Absolutely.
Nobody thought that mattered.
Think about that.
Everybody said, why are they making him put these gloves on? Why is he talking about how difficult it is? And I only bring that up because it's accessible to all of us.
To everybody. Unfortunately, I think for the criminal justice system and the public at large, that is the criminal case that is everybody's baseline of reference.
Unfortunately, it became a soap opera. Yeah. So tell me about appearance in the courtroom. What works, what doesn't?
I think first and foremost, you have to be yourself. You have to be comfortable in your own skin. I think lawyers get into trouble when they try to be somebody who they're not, whatever that is.
Am I wrong, though, in thinking that a lot of them do try to be something that they're not? I see some, let's say, odd choices where Like you come to me here and you have a very nice conservative approach where you could fit in any number of different places, right? But it seems as though some people maybe make the assumption that something more ostentatious means that they're more successful, right? Like, look at me, I'm wearing all this gold, or, I'm wearing shark skin, and
Right.
that obviously is expensive, and you should translate expensive with, I win a lot of cases. It doesn't feel right to me.
Jurors are very perceptive. And I think they have an innate, if not a collective ability to see through most of that.
Okay, if somebody wants to reach out to you, how would they find you?
On the internet, you can go to my website, www.matzuslaw.com, M-A-T as in Tom, Z as in Zebra, U-S, L-A-W.com. Or the old-fashioned way, you can pick up the phone and give me a call, 412-206-5300.
Jason, I appreciate you coming in and letting us just sort of pick and dissect at what you do. I know I found it illuminating. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
I apologize in advance for this being the lowest rated podcast you'll ever do.
I sincerely doubt that.
I do appreciate the opportunity coming in. I'd welcome the opportunity to come back.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming
Thanks,
in.
Scott. Take care.
All right, that's the end of our time this week. Thanks much to Jason Matzus. I hope you enjoyed that. That was really cool. I think what he does isn't that much different than what we do, and it was interesting to hear how many similarities there were. I think we learned a couple extra things, like, well, if you want to shoot down an idea, make it more complex. So the opposite is then true, right? If you want the jury to find for the defendant, then make the idea complex. If you want for the jury to find for the plaintiff, do the opposite. Make it simple and easy to understand, and make it so they can make a call right there that they agree with your vision. What works in a courtroom has to, at least sometimes, if not most of the time, work when we're giving a pitch. A confused buyer never buys. I'm sure you've heard that one. I'm not even sure who wrote that, but that's one of the many things I enjoyed from having Jason come into the studio. So hopefully you enjoyed our interview. Let us know one way or the other. Shoot us a note. All the social channels are open. Otherwise, we're just going to do another show in about 7 days, and I hope you'll tune in for that one as well. Take care of yourself. We'll catch you then.
The Pitchwerks podcast comes to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a production of the Epicast Network and McTaggart, LLC. Engineering and production by Buzzy Torek and Nick Miller. For more information, show feedback, and ad sales, visit pitchwerks.com. pitchwerks.com. On social media, find and follow the show on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram using that same brand name, pitchwerks.